Welcome to History of Art. If I may draw you into the dim, echoing chambers of prehistory, where the flicker of torchlight dances upon walls that have slumbered in silence for tens of thousands of years, we embark today on a journey not to the grand cathedrals of Renaissance Italy, or the sunlit marbles of classical Athens, but to the very dawn of human expression. Here, in the profound obscurity of ancient caves, we encounter the first tentative strokes of art, not as mere decoration, but as a cry from the human spirit, asserting its place in a world of ice and wilderness. Our theme, dear listeners, is the Panel de las Manos in the cave of El Castillo, that remarkable gallery of hand stencils in northern Spain, where the outlines of ancient palms speak to us across the abyss of time. These are not the vivid beasts of later caves, the charging bison or leaping horses that stir the imagination with their vitality. No, these are simpler marks, yet in their stark immediacy, they reveal the essence of what it means to create, to claim, to remember. Picture, if you will, the landscape of Ice Age Europe some 40,000 years ago. The world was a harsher mistress then. A vast undulating plain where woolly mammoths lumbered through forests of birch and pine, where herds of reindeer grazed under skies heavy with the promise of snow. Glaciers clawed at the northern edges of the continent, and rivers carved deep gorges into the limestone hills of what we now call Cantabria in Spain. It was here, in this rugged corner where the Cantabrian Sea meets the mountains, that bands of early humans, hardy souls, our direct ancestors, the Cro-Magnons, sought shelter. They were hunter-gatherers, their lives a rhythm of pursuit and repose, tracking deer across frozen tundras by day, huddling around hearths at night, sharing tales in the glow of fat-rendered lamps. These were not the brutish primitives of old myths, but people of keen observation whose tools of flint and bone bespoke a growing ingenuity. And yet, what drove them into the earth's hidden bowels, those twisting tunnels of stone, to leave behind these ghostly imprints? Ah, that is the poetry of our story. The cave of El Castillo lies nestled within the Monte Castillo complex, a labyrinth of caverns near the village of Puente Viesco, just a stone's throw from the historic town of Santander. Discovered in 1903 by the indefatigable Spanish archaeologist Emilio Alcalde del Rio, it is no grand vault like its neighbor Altamira, with its famous ceiling of polychrome bison, that Sistine Chapel of the Stone Age, as it has been aptly called. El Castillo is more modest, a warren of passages extending some 300 meters into the rock, its floors littered with the debris of ancient occupations, charred bones of aurochs and ibex, shards of ochre for pigment, fragments of lamps fashioned from hollowed stone. But it is the Panel de las Manos, tucked away in a narrow corridor known as the Gallery of the Discs and Hands, that commands our reverie. Here, on a sheer wall of pale limestone, clustered dozens of negative hand stencils, silhouettes wrought not by direct painting, but by the breath-blown spray of pigment around outstretched palms pressed to the stone. Beside them, simple red discs, mere ochre smears applied with fingers or pads of moss, form a rhythmic counterpoint. It is a composition of restraint, almost abstract in its economy, yet pulsing with an intimate urgency. To grasp the antiquity of this panel, we must turn to the patient labors of modern science, those wizards of the laboratory who wield uranium thorium, dating like a diviner's rod. In 2012, a team led by researchers from the University of Bristol and Spanish institutions analyzed the thin crusts of calcite, nature's own varnish, that had formed over these markings since their creation. The verdict was staggering. A vivid red disk, no larger than a saucer, bears a minimum age of 40,800 years, while the hand stencils themselves date to at least 37,290 years old. These figures, dear friends, propel us back to the Aurignacian period, the very cusp of modern human arrival in Europe, around 43,000 years ago. We are closer in time to the artists who made these marks than they were to the first tentative daubs on that wall. Imagine the implications. This art predates the grand narratives of Chauvet Cave in France by some 5 millennia, and it whispers of a creative impulse that flowered almost as soon as our kind set foot on this continent. But who were these artists? Here we tread into realms of speculation, laced with the thrill of discovery. The dates overlap tantalizingly with the twilight of the Neanderthals, those enigmatic cousins of ours who lingered in Iberian refugia until perhaps 37,000 years past. Could a Neanderthal hand, broad and sturdy, have been the model for one of these stencils? The evidence teases but does not confirm. Genetic traces in the cave's sediments point to modern humans, yet the possibility lingers like a shadow in torchlight. What we do know is that these stencils were made by both men and women. Studies of finger-length ratios in the prints suggest a majority from female hands, upending old notions of art as a masculine pursuit. Children, too, may have joined, their smaller palms adding a tender scale to the ensemble. The technique was deceptively simple. A hand flattened against the cool rock, a hollow bone or reed filled with red ochre slurry, ground hematite mixed with water and fat, and pigment atomized by the forceful expulsion of breath. The result? A ghost hand, pale against the ruddy halo, as if the very air had captured the gesture of presence. Why the left hand dominates, some 40 to 60% in such panels, remains a puzzle. Perhaps ritual favored the sinister side, or maybe it was merely the right hand's task to wield the blower. Now let us linger on the why of it all, for art without motive is but decoration, and these hands are anything but. In the grand sweep of history, we see hands as symbols of agency, the potter's grasp shaping clay, the sculptor's chisel biting marble, the painter's brush evoking form from void. So too here, in prehistory's cradle. These stencils may have served as signatures, tally marks of hunts or clans, assertions of territory in a world where survival hinged on communal bonds. Or consider them talismans, invocations to the spirits of the cave, those subterranean deities who guarded the earth's bounty. The panel's location, deep within the system, away from the practical hearths of daily life, suggests a sacred precinct, a place of initiation or trance, where the rhythmic blow of pigment accompanied chants or dances lost to time. Ethnographers tell us of indigenous peoples today, from Australian Aboriginals to Amazonian tribes, who use hand stencils in rites of passage, marking the transition from child to adult, or honouring the ancestors. Might not our Ice Age forebears have done the same? Beside the hands, those enigmatic discs, red as fresh blood, could symbolize the sun, or eyes watching from the dark, or simply the joy of making, the first abstract geometries born of idle fingers. To fully appreciate this panel, one must evoke its siblings across the Paleolithic tapestry. In Altamira, just 20 kilometers distant, the hands mingle with the later Magdalenian menagerie. Bison in russet and black, their forms so lifelike they seem to snort from the ceiling. In El Castillo itself, the hands precede these figurative flourishes. The cave's chronology unfolds like a palimpsest, with engravings of hinds and horses overlaying the earlier abstracts, spanning perhaps 20 millennia of intermittent visitation. Compare them to the sprawling hand galleries of Gargas in the French Pyrenees, where mutilated fingers, bent or truncated, hint at shamanic mutilation, or the vivid positives of Cosca Cave, submerged now off Marseille's coast. Globally, hands echo from Sulawesi's casts in Indonesia to the sandstone shelters of Arnhem Land, a universal lexicon of the human form. Yet El Castillo's panel stands apart for its precocity, a foundational chapter in the history of art, reminding us that creativity did not erupt fully formed with the Venus of Willendorf or the Lion Man of Hohenstein, but began in humble signs, redolent of breath and belonging. Of course, no tale of ancient art is complete without the drama of its unveiling to the modern world. When Alcalde del Rio first crawled into El Castillo over a century ago, torch in hand, he entered a realm dismissed by contemporaries as the domain of savages. Prehistory was then a fledgling science, shadowed by biblical timelines that cramped the Earth's age to mere thousands of years. The cave's riches, its discs, its stencils, its later beasts, were catalogued in exhaustive monographs, yet their full age eluded grasp until radiocarbon and uranium methods pierced the veil in the late 20th century. Today, El Castillo is a UNESCO jewel, part of the extended patrimony of northern Spain's Paleolithic caves, guarded jealously against the breath of tourists that once threatened Altamira's frescoes with fungal bloom. Limited access preserves it, but replicas and digital scans allow us all to wander its corridors vicariously, a democratizing grace in an age of fragile wonders. As we draw toward the close of our reflection, let these hands bid us pause. In a world grown loud with images, billboards, and ceaseless screens, these ancient outlines, born of ochre and exhalation, reclaim the power of the simple mark. They teach us that art's true lineage is not one of technique or theme, but of the urge to externalize the inner life, to bridge the solitude of self with the community of stone. Who can gaze upon the Panel de las Manos without feeling the echo of that primal breath, the artist's palm yearning to imprint eternity? It is a call to our own hands, to create, to connect, to leave a trace that outlives the ice. And so, dear listeners, as the echoes fade in El Castillo's depths, may you carry forth this quiet revelation, that in the beginning there were hands, and they were enough. Until our next descent into history's luminous shadows, farewell.